Recently, I've been able to have an opportunity to share my story on the news here locally in Utah, and Intermountain Health has been uh, kind enough to feature my story in some of their social media. Um, what you see on the news and what you get through those social media posts is really the key parts of the story that I have. The thing that I hope to accomplish here is to kind of fill in the gaps, um, and kind of have everything uh, start to finish shared here in a longer format. Um, the news has got anywhere from like 3 to 5 minutes to get it out there, and also create a compelling story. And they've done a great job. I think people may find value in hearing my story start to finish, straight from my mouth too. And so that's where I want to do this. Um, I have been able to reflect on the last few days since I've had the news story come out, and I think that yeah, like I said, I just want to start to finish this thing and go a little bit longer. Um, so from the beginning, um, I'm not sure this part made it into the news. Um, the reporting that was done on the news, um, but the first time I had a symptom was in September 2020. But really, I think that my story starts earlier than that. I think my story really starts in uh, April, May 2020. COVID, fresh on everybody's minds. A lot of uncertainty about what it means. One thing that seemed to be a consistent message was the meta, the more metabolically healthy you are, the better your outcome seemed to be. Um, I decided to throw myself at that. Um, I knew I had a few pounds to lose as well, so I thought, hey, let's get after it. Um, and between then and September, I really feel like I became more in tune with my body from a how I feel perspective than I have felt in a long time at that point. Yeah, so in September 2020, I had my first symptom. It was a really, really bad cramp. I've never had anything like that before, um, where it kept me in bed all day, and I thought I'd just eaten something that didn't agree with me. Um, in that afternoon, that day, I finally was able to get out of bed and kind of just go about my normal business, and just kind of shrugged it off like that was weird. Um, totally felt normal after that for a few weeks. In October, it came back and had the same cramping, not quite as intense, um, but it was actually driving down to St. George for a quick little family getaway, um, and I was able to drive the rest of the way, no problem. And by the time we got there, I felt a lot better, and didn't really think much of it again. Trying to connect the dots, actually, like, okay, what did I eat in September, and what did I eat today? What's causing this? Um, really focused on like what I had eaten, and not really thinking it could be anything else. Um, November, the only thing remarkable about November is my whole family caught COVID for the first time. Um, and yeah, so that was kind of an interesting experience, losing taste and smell and all that, and got pretty sick, but recovered just fine, no problem. Um, in December, I had the cramping come back, and as it progressed through the day, it localized, really right on my right side of my abdomen. And that was the first time I had been like, okay, this isn't something I have eaten, it's something else. And the only thing that I could contextualize with that type of feeling was, okay, it's on the right side. It's probably appendicitis. So let's go figure this out. After a little while, we finally decided to go to the emergency room and get checked out. And, I admittedly felt a little weird telling everybody I think it's appendicitis, because everyone I'd heard who had appendicitis had said it's like 10 or 11 on this pain scale, like between 1 and 10. And I was sitting there anywhere from like a 3 to a 6. Um, and I remember just thinking, like, I don't think it's appendicitis, like, now that I'm here, but I knew something wasn't right. Something in me was telling me that there's something wrong, and I could feel something was wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on it. And we had a scan and blood work and a total ER workup. Um, and they were getting ready to send me home. And the doctor, kind of at the on the tail end of the conversation of the discharge, said something like, "Do you have a history of cancer in your family?" Um, and that was the first time that cancer had crossed my mind, that it could be cancer. But I was like, I don't really. I mean, I had my grandpa had esophagus cancer. My mom had thyroid cancer. Um, but yeah, not really a huge family history of it. And I remember I kind of dwelled on that for a little bit. Um, I We went home with a discharge that said you have some inflammation in your bowels. Recommendation to follow up with a gastroenterologist and possibly have um, a colonoscopy. And so I got in touch with a gastroenterologist, Dr. Shakir. Um, he's great, and met with him not too many days later. And um, in fact, with that visit, we talked, had a consult. He asked me a bunch of questions, and I brought up the idea of, like, that the ER doctor had brought up about it being possibly being cancer. And he asked me more questions, showed me even like some stool samples, asked me if mine looked like any of them, asked me if I had blood in my stool, what kind of symptoms I'd had. And really, at that point, the only thing I'd had was some cramping. And he said based on what we talked about, he really didn't think it was cancer, but let's go ahead and do the colonoscopy and just make sure there's nothing to be seen. Fast forward, a little while later, still in December, I was able to get a colonoscopy. It was COVID still, and so the plan was to get dropped off at the curb, basically, and go in, get the colonoscopy procedure done, and then I think it was my dad was supposed to pick me up. Like, they wheel me out to the curb and send me on my way. When I woke up, however, Michelle was there, my wife, and they said, "Oh, let me go get Michelle." And I was like, "Wait, why is Michelle here? That's not the plan." And I didn't put two and two together that something was wrong. Um, and so she came in, and then Dr. Shakir came in, and he said something along the lines of, like, "I'm so sorry." Um, and he looked like he had seen a ghost. Just looked very, very sorrowful, I guess is the word. And he said, "I'm really sorry, but we did your procedure and we found a mass, and it looks like it's probably cancer." Um, and the next thing I said was, "Okay, well, what do we do next?" And he reiterated, "Well, hold on, I don't, I want to make sure you hear what I said. I think you have cancer." I said, "Yeah, I heard you, but I need to know what we do next." Um, I don't know if it was, just the drugs still wearing off from the procedure or whatever, but my mindset was like, okay, yeah, what next? All right, this is it. So what do we do? Um, and from there, it was a little bit of a whirlwind. I got linked up with a surgeon, Dr. Mawini, who, Small Lake Valley here in Utah. He's the older brother of a girl that I went to high school with, Lindsay Mawini, and um, yeah, pretty small world from that regard. Anyway, as I consulted with him, several times he asked me like, okay, now remind me, how did you find out you had something that you needed to be checked up on? And I told him about the cramping and stuff, and he wanted to know if he could share my story with some of his colleagues because it was remarkable to him that that's what brought me in and that I actually followed through in getting a colonoscopy. He said most young men that come in with that, they are to the point where they've been recommended a colonoscopy, but for whatever reason, whether their symptoms subside or cost or downtime, um, they elect not to have the colonoscopy, and they come back, months later and find that they actually did have cancer. And you know, if you know anything about cancer, months can make a difference if it's untreated. It could change your whole entire trajectory. Had my surgery on December 31st, so New Year's Eve. Sent our kids to hang out with my brother-in-law and his family, and they had a great time together. And me and my wife spent the night in the hospital. Um, Surgery was successful. First day, I felt pretty good. Second day, not so great. And the second night was awful. The nurses were subpar, and I think they were doing their best. Like I said, it was still COVID and it was still like weirdness. But I don't know how I would have made it through that night if my wife Michelle hadn't have been there. um, yeah, that was a mess. um, but yeah, so after that I went home, spent a few weeks healing. I even snuck in a day snowboarding up at Brighton one night. um, it was nice to be on snow, but it was really tentative because still kind of healing from surgery. Even though I'd been given the green light from my surgeon, I still held back a little bit. So I was up there for I think a couple hours and a handful of runs, and then not long after, I got linked up with Utah cancer specialists. And uh, when I talked to that nurse, the first time I talked to the nurse was when things really hit me, where and this was before surgery, but just the idea that, okay, I'm having surgery and then I'm going to do chemo, and I'm going to go through this, and this is reality. um, it was scary at that time. It was really scary. Chance, I mean, I had good chances. I can't remember the percentages at that point of being um, cured, but they were better than most cancers, I guess. But it was still really scary. um, yeah, so a few weeks after surgery I started chemo, early February in 2021. um, I ended up doing, when I consulted with my oncologist, Dr. Wisnant, who's also been incredible throughout all this, um, we talked about multiple options. And there's kind of like a flow chart that you look at and say, you have this cancer at this stage. You can do this or this treatment, is what the data shows is your best options. And after talking through the options, we ended up going with one called Capox, which is capecitabine and oxaliplatin. The oxaliplatin is a infusion. Um, the uh, capecitabine is an oral chemo. So you take these pills. They're not huge pills, but they're bigger than like an aspirin or Tylenol or something. And so the process was, I would have an infusion, and then for 2 weeks I would take pills every day, twice a day, and then I'd have a week off and repeat that 4 times. Throughout that, they found, through my blood work I was doing, that I was actually pretty severely anemic too, as a result of my tumor bleeding, which you'd think, well, why wasn't there blood in your stool to, raise an indicator that you had another symptom? The location of my tumor was on the right side of my body, um, in the ileocecal valve. And because of that, by the time, it hit the exit, there was nothing to be seen. It just all looked like normal poop. Um, just another reason that you have to be so focused in on the symptoms that you are seeing if you have them. And not even seeing, but feeling in my case. So yeah, the K-pox is a shorter duration. As I said, it's 4 rounds over 3 months, and it was intense. I had seen people like either directly or on the periphery of like friendships and stuff who'd gone through chemo, and they were able to kind of live a pretty normal life. They'd have be kind of sick the day of the infusion or whatever, but then they get back to doing what they do. I expected that. The first week I tried to work normal schedule and everything, and I realized I couldn't. Then for the second round, I ended up going on FEMLA, the family medical leave from my job, which I'm so grateful for the support my job provided me throughout all this. Yeah, really, really grateful for the people who were involved in helping me through that. Um, and just on that note, my team and like my whole department like pitched in to like get us some gift cards for like DoorDash and like groceries and stuff. And just, yeah, it's really humbling when people help you out. Um, yeah, so the second round of chemo crushed me completely. That's when it really got bad, like the worst. Um, there were days when I had to take it not a day at a time, not even an hour at a time. I had to take it a minute at a time to get through the chemo. Um, on some of the days, especially in that second round. Um, the side effects were really bad. Like I could smell water, and therefore I didn't have an appetite for water. Got dehydrated, and one of the things that they tell chemo patients to combat the dehydration is to use like popsicles or something uh, to make it so you can consume liquid and be hydrated. Um, the oxaliplatin has a side effect though, which is cold sensitivity. So your throat gets sensitive to cold in such that if you drink something that isn't warm, for me, that presented like it felt like either Velcro or like shards of glass were in my throat. Even going outside and breathing in cool or cold air had that same feeling. Um, Not pleasant. Every time I had to take the capecitabine pills, my body it learned it wasn't a good thing, and I've never had a problem taking pills. And these, every single time I went to take them, it was a matter of gagging them down, just my body full on trying to reject them. Um, it was really, really hard. And then as soon as I took them, I just immediately started feeling that just horrible, horrible feeling. Um, Energy drain, generally just feeling not good. Um, but I made it through. Like I said, I was anemic, so they had to do some iron infusions to get my blood levels back up. Um, Throughout that, I had so many people come over and support my family and me. Um, Michelle, I don't know how she did it, but she kept everything on track. Um, Legitimately heroic effort from her to keep our family moving forward while I was literally going from the bed to the chair, maybe to the couch, back to the chair, and then back to bed. Um, Trying to get in as much movement and even just walking as I could when I had the energy to, which was rarely, especially after that second round. Yeah, I mean, I lost like 30 something pounds. It wasn't pretty. Um, More than once, I had to go into the infusion center off schedule to get IV of fluids to hydrate me and prevent the dehydration from getting really bad. Um, but yeah, I made it through, got to the end of it. Um, I'm sure there's some stories in there that I could dive into, but for the sake of time on this, I just, that day when I got to ring the bell was interesting. Um, you feel like you want to celebrate for sure because like, hey, I'm done with this, and at that point I was like, I'm done with this for now. Was like, I had to keep, I don't know why I kept going back to, I'm done with this for now. In the back of my head I thought like, you know this could come back, this could come back. um, and so you celebrate, but celebrate while looking over your shoulder. um, and then it's tough too when you see these other people still sitting in the infusion area getting their chemo, and they're clapping for you. They're excited. Just they see someone who's going through what they're going through, who's done. um, and so yeah, it was bittersweet, mostly sweet for sure, but definitely some bitter in there too. um, and then after that, I got onto a surveillance schedule where, up until just this last December, so December 2023, up until that point, I was having blood work done every 3 months, checking with my oncologist every 3 months, um, and every 6 months having a scan done to check for any signs of spread. Um, Luckily, that never happened. My blood work always was good. Um, my scans always came back good. And in December of 2023, this last December, my oncologist was like, all right, I mean, you're through that first phase of surveillance. If you can make it to 5 years, that's when we kind of consider you cured of this cancer. Um, and so, I still have a couple more years to get to that point, but making it to 3 years post surgery, is a huge step forward. Um, and so now at this point, I still am on surveillance, but it's a scan once a year, and the blood work every 6 months. Um, Throughout all of that, there was a lot of anxiety. Are they going to find something? There's a term like scan anxiety. I think it's shortened it like scanxiety or something. It's a real thing. If you've gone through that, or someone who has, it's a real thing, and it messes with you. But like I said, luckily for me, I feel really lucky and blessed that it didn't come back, at least not yet. Um, my prognosis at this point is good. Um, and I finally am to the point where I feel like I can look forward a little bit. Well, a lot of it actually, because before I, it took me a long time to get to the point where I could think ahead more than a couple years. Um, it became really easy for me to catastrophize and think, I'm not going to see these certain future events. I'm not going to be around, and I might not be for a number of reasons. Um, but at this point now, I feel good, and I feel like I'm able to process and live pretty much normal life. Um, One thing that I've seen in other stories is, people will have to have like ostomy bags or something. Um, I luckily didn't have to have that. Um, one thing, the one lasting side effect I have from chemotherapy is neuropathy in my big toes. Basically, kind of a constant sensation that like your foot has fallen asleep. So that gets really interesting when I'm out for a longer run, and that proceeds to get worse. And so running with tingly or numb feet is always a little challenging. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty much doing my thing now. I work a full-time job. Um, I've got hobbies, that I love to do. Um, Obviously, my family. That is one thing that was really tough, is making sure we communicated to my kids, who were 8 and 5 years old at the time, um, how to talk to them about the diagnosis, and that dad's going to be sick for a little while and he's not going to be able to do much, and just making sure they knew, like, if I can't get off the couch, it's not because I'm trying to avoid time with them, it's because I can't get off the couch. um, and I think they definitely internalized it a little bit. Some days, some weeks more than others, um, but overall, just they were so resilient through it. Maybe they'll have to deal with that in therapy later on in life, but for now, it seems like they've processed it, and it's over in their minds, I think, and hopefully it is. There's still a really small chance I have a recurrence, um, and I try to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen. The things that I can do through that, or in that regard, to make sure that it doesn't happen, the only things that are in my control are, number one, making sure I'm active. And I'll touch on that further here in a minute. And number two, keeping my diet in check, basically not eating like an idiot, um, all things in moderation, um, and taking a baby aspirin once a day. There seems to be some studies on that, and some more recent ones seem to that maybe put that up in the air a little bit. But you know what I've done so far has worked, so I'm going to keep doing it at least for another couple of years. Um, on the exercise and fitness front, um, I get a little, I don't know, passionate about it, I guess, because, like I said, from the get go, being in a position where I knew my body and I knew what I was feeling wasn't right, I think was a huge reason that I was able to stop and say, no, we need to figure this out. And then beyond that, once I was through chemo, they told me, and they being my various doctors and my oncologists and stuff, and out of just like giving me information, not trying to tell me not to do things, but just cautioning me, you're not going to have a lot of energy for the first little while, your body's going to take up to 6 months to return to normal. And I just kind of asked, like, okay, well, I've just sat on the couch for 3 months, I don't want to not do anything. What if I just tackle, like, number one, getting my strength back, and I tackled that head on and aggressively. And they said, yeah, I mean, that's fine. It's not going to hurt anything, but you just might not have the energy to do it. And I definitely tackled that head on. I went full bore into a strength building program, and I hit some personal records in strength and for a lifetime. And I think that made a big difference, because I've since read studies that they talk about the importance of exercise in the first year after finishing chemotherapy for colon cancer. It not only, like, from their studies, not only delays a recurrence, but can actually prevent one. 1 to 3 years is the timeline they looked at for that. So that's where I think it's so important to keep that physical activity up. And it also can help you just not get it in the first place too, if you're physically active, you know. And on that note about getting cancer, um, I had to try to rationalize for a long time, like, what did I do wrong to get this? Like, how did I get this? Did I eat the wrong food? Did I, get Roundup into my body somehow? Like when you're spraying weeds and there's that whole Roundup thing, right? Like, you know, did that get me or whatever? Um, and ultimately, we did genetic testing to make sure it wasn't a mutation on any genes that we need to watch out for, um, throughout my immediate family, or especially for my children. And all the genetic testing was negative. Um, I simply won the bad luck lottery, is how, I can't remember which doctor said that to me. Um, but yeah, it's just a random, there's a term for it now, I can't remember what it is, but it's basically random cancer that just kind of came out of nowhere. And so that's that part of it. On that note, though, I did tell my family. I was pretty, the thing that made me open up about this was, number one, hearing my doctor, my surgeon, really early on comment to me about how remarkable it was that I caught it early on, in the way that I did. And that's what initially had me be very open about what I went through at that point. And then throughout, to document kind of my journey on social media too. Um, I then heard some stories about friends who had told other friends about my story, and those other friends had, unbeknownst to the friend I have, had gone out and gotten checked, and turns out they had had precancerous polyps themselves. And they came back and told their friend, and the friend told me, and that really kind of underscored it. And then when my sister got her colonoscopy, because all my siblings got colonoscopies after my diagnosis, um, my sister actually has, another, I don't know, syndrome or something, condition, I guess is probably the best word for it, that presents symptoms in her abdomen. And she went and got her colonoscopy, and they actually found, precancerous polyps. And I don't know, because we'll never know, but I would worry that she would have not wondered about anything other than her current condition causing those symptoms, and those polyps could have developed into something worse, um, by the time she turned 45, especially. Um, she's younger than I am. And so, again, just another underscore on the reason why I choose to be vocal about what I went through and my story. Um, I don't want like all the attention on me. I don't want the spotlight on me. Um, but I want the spotlight on the story and the importance of being able to listen to your body. One thing that I've picked up on and kind of latched onto is this idea of like, listen to your body while it's whispering so you don't have to deal with it when it's screaming. And that seems to be something that resonates with me, certainly, and with a lot of other people too. And I mean, it's true. Um, if you don't listen to it when it's whispering, you're going to have a hell of a time later on with it. Um, and so the I try to think about like, what are the actionable things you can take away from a story like mine. Number one is, you have to know your body and know when something's not right. And number two, when you recognize that, seek help. Um, take your symptoms and tell your doctor. And if your doctor chalks it up to something else, and if you feel like that's right, then fine, follow that, and that, listen to your doctor and do that. But if you still think something's not right, and the reason I say that is not because I don't think doctors can do their job. I think they can. um, but I've heard and read so many stories of people being told, oh, it's nothing, you're too young, you're too healthy. That's a big one, is people think you can't get cancer if you're healthy. I know of a lady who was like a CrossFit mom, and she was like, she kicked my butt, um, and she got colon cancer and died. um, it doesn't matter if it's going to get you, and it doesn't matter how fit you are, it doesn't matter how young you are, it can be something you go through. And so the point of bringing up the doctors is that they look at the data, and if the data doesn't tell them that you should get a certain treatment, they're probably going to recommend the most likely treatment course. Um, and so the point of that is that if you feel like that's not right, persist and be honest and very open and assertive with your symptoms with your doctor. Um, if they're still not hearing you, go to another doctor, go to a third doctor. Second and third opinions are so valuable. Um, it's worth it, because that time frame, if it is something, if it is colon cancer, those months you miss out on can make a difference in your treatment and how it goes. Um, and then the third thing is to talk about your story. I don't think you have to go on the news. I don't think you have to have an Instagram account about it or whatever. I've done some of those things, but I don't think you have to do that. But you at least need to tell the people that are in your family about it, and tell people close to you about it. You don't have to go into the nitty gritty details, but find your way to use your story to help other people and to help spread awareness about this. The data showing that it's getting younger and younger in people that are diagnosed with colon cancer. Um, I hope that doesn't continue. Maybe this is a weird point in our history with it. Um, but it is something that everybody needs to understand. It can be something you have to go through, no matter what your age is, no matter what your fitness level is, no matter if you're vegan or carnivore. It doesn't matter. There are things that with colon cancer that help, but ultimately, if you have something that mutates and it turns into that colon cancer, um, it doesn't matter how healthy you are or how young you are. Being young and healthy certainly helps, but it can still be something you have to deal with. Um, and I think that's probably all I want to go into for this. I don't know if I'll do another something like this, but I at least wanted to have this story out there for everybody to hear it kind of start to where I am now, um, and put it out there for people who are, if you're, the people I think benefit from this the most are people who are, 20s, 30s, 40s, something year olds who maybe have some symptoms but don't know what to do. Maybe have symptoms, but you're scared about what a colonoscopy could mean. Um, Colonoscopies, the prep, nobody likes the prep. But one thing I want to emphasize with that is that the prep is a lot different than it was. Like if you hear your parents talking about what the prep was like, it's different now. Like, and if you have to get one, make sure you're asking your doctor to give you the Gatorade and Miralax prep. The other one is not pleasant at all. Um, it's not horrible, but it's the Gatorade and Miralax is way better. Um, and then yeah, you have a lot of liquid come out of you, and you get cleared out. And that part's not super fun, but it's also not horrible. I can think of a lot of worse things I've had to go through. um, and then the actual procedure, they wheel you in, they make you feel really comfortable, they get you set up on the table, give you the was it like propofol or something that puts you under, and you fall asleep, and then you wake up, and hopefully you get good news. um, but yeah, from that perspective, it's not a big deal at all. Um, and yeah, don't be afraid of that. Just take the time to reflect on, if you have symptoms, how you can talk to your doctor about it confidently. Um, and make sure you're, like I said, assertive about it. Make sure you are really, really transparent about how you're feeling. And, again, if you need to, get a second and third opinion. Um, and yeah, I think that's it. So reach out if you have questions. Um, and if not, maybe I'll do another one of these with, maybe somebody else or um, something. I don't know if this will turn into like a full blown podcast or anything like that, but I at least wanted to have my story start to finish documented somewhere, that was in a format you could listen to and not have to, read. And that wasn't limited to a, 3 to 5 minute segment on the news. So, yeah, hope you're all doing great, and I will talk to you another time.